Hi, welcome back again. Right, yesterday I did 5 thread plait, the day before the 3 thread plait. Today I'm going to look at finger loop braiding. There's a slight caveat on here, that being I'm not very good at this. Finger loop braiding is quite important. I'll go into details of that later, why. But it's not something I do very often, and I never got that good at it when I was doing it a bit more regularly. So I might struggle with this. If you want a better tutorial on how to do the actual braiding, have a search on the internet. There's going to be loads of web pages, videos on YouTube telling you how to do it. Make sure you get it right. However, I'm going to cover it now because I want to make sure that we pick up important details on it. So, I've already cut the lengths, as you can see, done just like I did for the plaiting, with a couple of significant differences. Firstly, there's only 14, or 7 actually, threads. That's because we'll be working with loops. So each loop will double up. You'll get twice the thickness. So you want half as many loops for the same thickness. 15 doesn't divide easily, not give whole numbers. So I've gone for 14 divided by 2 is 7. The other point is they're twice as long. Whereas before I was cutting at both ends of the thread, at the bottom and the top. This time I've only cut at the bottom to give me a long loop. And that's because we're going to be braiding using the loops. So, our first job is to get everything lined up for an even length. Just as before, we're going to need to wax this thread. Before we start forming loops out of it, and I can show you that's going to make it nice and sticky and difficult to work with. But that's the fun of the game, isn't it? So just as before, wrap it around your finger for stability and drag it through the wax a few times. Well, it seems to be fairly soft today, so it's not having to work so hard to get it warmed up. And the other end. Now we aren't going to be twisting these together this time. We want them to work as separate loops. If you were doing, say, 5 loops as a double thickness, but you would want to twist those up just as before. But because these are single loops, we're just going to work them single. So we need to separate them out now. It's good they're about the same at each end. As you can see, they're twisted together a bit, which is why we need to separate them now. Because it will be really difficult to do it once we've tied them on.
Could you wax each thread individually rather than as a group?
Yes, yeah, you could wax each thread individually. I'm just a bit lazy, so I prefer to do them all as one. And let's be honest, you'd get pretty bored watching me do that for 7 times. Right. Okay. Split out, so now we can put them back together. What I'm trying to achieve here is an even length. It's quite important that the loops are all the same length. If you've got one very long one and one very short one and some in the middle, you're going to really struggle to control your braiding. these lined up. Better to have a little bit sticking at the top than not, than have them too short and falling out or anything like that. So let's try tying one big knot. You might find it's better to tie them on individually to your thread. One big knot. Open that up, so we've got a nice big hole to work with, and put cord through. Again, I'm using a point I made earlier, because why not? All I need is something to take the strain. I could use an offcut of this, if I had one. I could use, we've got trouble here. As you can see, our loops have got tangled. Never quite figure out how they can manage that, so I'll give up on that plan. We'll go back to our original idea of tying them on separately. So put that around there. Tie a little knot. Right, do you want to take a little break and come back when I've got this ready? Okay, sorry about the break there, that was getting rather fiddly. As you can see, I've now got 7 loops all laid out, knots at one end, loops at the other with a string in them. I'm going to do something a little weird now. I'm going to feed the string in, a different string in, at the other end. This is going to help me. I want to have the knot end secured, you see, and this is going to help me keep it a bit more even and stop them getting tangled up so much, I hope. And if I'm wrong, you're going to get to laugh at me. Just ease that over. You can see why I'm not fond of finger loop braiding and don't do so much of it as I do the plaiting. Once you've got it set up, it's quite easy to get on with. Right. Now we lift that up, move it together and tie it onto some fixed point. It's another of these where you connect yourselves to some fairly weighty item and have to stick with it till it's done, unfortunately. There's no easy way around that. Okay, we now have 7 loops fastened up, and I need to separate them out one at a time to come off there and onto my hands. From that, that's 2.
Each loop is going on an individual finger.
Yes,
At the moment.
I will talk you through that once I've got hold of all my loops. But yeah, it's easier if you lift them onto individual fingers. all up because I don't have enough fingers on one hand.
Really sorry.
Right, so what I'm now going to do is transfer those three onto this hand.
Those three?
And that gives us our basic starting position. Right. So we've got, I'm right-handed, it doesn't matter which side you start with. I've got 4 loops, 1 on each finger on the left hand, 3 on the bottom 3 fingers of my right hand. And I'm just going to have to ask my wife to help me a bit now and make sure that all the knots are at the bottom of my string.
I'll have to put this down while I do that.
Good. Now, the reason I persevere with this, even though I'm, as you can tell, not getting on with it brilliantly, is that we know with absolute fact that this was a popular method in the Middle Ages. They even wrote books about how to do it. That book is available in some form today, is known as Take 5 Bows Departed. Take 5 Bows Departed, if you want to have a look for it. The other big advantages of finger loop braiding is, one, it's stronger because each loop ties into all the other loops, and they are waxed so they stick to each other as well. It really binds together well and spreads the load much better than the plaits do. The other advantage of finger loop braiding, aside from its obvious definite authenticity, is that I think that should do. Is that there's a lot of different things you can do with it, but I'll come back to that later. So, having got our starting position, I now reach through that loop.
Can you not say that loop? Can you say which one?
Oh, it's the top loop on my right hand. So it's the nearest one to my finger. Reach through with it with my free finger and pick the loop off the opposite little finger. Now, I walk the loops down to leave the index finger free on that hand. I can now reach through there, pick up the bottom. Always pick up the bottom of the loop, not the top. Again, we'll come back to why. And now, if I just give it a pull, which is why you need a solidly fastened point, it will tighten up. So, same again.
So when you say give it a pull, you're pulling your left hand and your right hand apart from one another?
Yes. Now we'll walk them down on that hand and pull it through the loop and tension it. As you can see, once you get the hang of it, excuse me, you can quite get into the flow. I mean, you can fasten this to any fixed point. You can fasten it to your toe if you're so inclined. I'm just using a chair and regretting it. Now, there are lots of different ways to do finger loop braiding. I'm not going to go into the details on them. This is a basic loop that will form a flat braid, which is just what we've got with the plaits. There are other methods that will form round braids. There are methods that will form 2 braids at once. It's quite a complicated and flexible technique. As you can see, once you've got into the flow of it, it runs quite well. It does make your fingers a bit sore, because they're under quite a bit of tension. I'm told you can get a special type of tape from the pharmacist that will stop your fingers getting rubbed. It's particularly useful if you're using a waxed thread like this, because you've got that very high friction. And how's that braid forming now? Are we seeing anything recognisable yet?
Yes.
Oh, excellent. It's not just turning into a horrible knotted mess.
No.
Good.
Not pretty.
I did say I'm not very good at this. If you're using very long lengths of thread, or more than 9 loops, you can end up with 2 people doing it. Either one person being the left hand and one person being the right hand, so you can separate further than the span of your arms, or you can end up with 2 people both being different, both being part of the sets of hands, so you end up with 20 fingers, which is all, I say, it's got a lot of flexibility and history to it. Now, other interesting points, all 3 of these techniques can be used with coloured cords. I've used a simple plain hemp, but if you go for coloured one, you'll end up with coloured points. If you go for multiple coloured ones, you can end up with multicoloured points. There are images in the Burrell collection, I believe, in Glasgow Museum, showing points with 2 or 3 colours in them. So we know that was done. This is good for your shoulders. What other important points I have to tell you? The lucette is probably worth mentioning. A lot of reenactors use lucettes to make points. It's not something I've done for a long time, for a couple of reasons. Firstly, the earliest that I am certain the lucette appears in the historical record is about 1960. I don't know if it was in use earlier than the 20th century. The second issue is that, of course, it's a single piece of thread making up the whole of the cord, whereas this is 7 separate threads forming the cord. If one of them breaks, the other 6 hold. In fact, because the way we're doing this, the other half of that one and all of the other 6 hold, which means it's a lot more resistant to breaking. If a lucette cord breaks, it will start to unravel. Of course, you can get really interesting decorated cords with this. Right, you can see it's actually starting to form up properly. I'm not very good at this, as I said, but we're starting to get the look. It does look a lot like the plaited cords. I'll finish this off, we'll come back and have a look at them all together at the end. We'll talk about their differences and advantages of them. Well, that was some effort, but we finish now, so I'll just loosen this off the chair. Oh. As I said earlier, I'm not very good at this. I've not done it for a few years. But you can see, particularly there, how the thread forms up with this ridge down the side. All these loose bits sticking out where I've got the tension wrong. But we sit it next to the 5-strand braid. You can see quite a striking similarity. The 3-strand is just a coarser version of the same. But any of these will work fine for your arming points. The last thing we need, excuse me, the last thing we need to do is to add these aiglets, the pointy bits, onto the end. In the next video I'm going to show you how to make one of these from brass sheet, which is available in any hobby shop, well, from many good hobby shops, particularly train shops. Show you how you can make one of those. Alternatively, you can buy them, which is my usual preferred option, or a cheat that you can use to make them from a piece of brass tube. So, I'll see you for that.